Hello, this is Joe and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to continue on with the CEM120 mount, some of the things that I like about it so far, some of the things that I don't like about it. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the guiding and what I found out, and also why I chose this mount over some other mounts, and also as well as why I need to send this mount back, unfortunately. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to say is that when I got my mount, it was in non-working order. The deck gear switch would not turn all the way 90 degrees. It wouldn't lock into place. It would go about 45 degrees and it would actually guide that way just fine, but of course it wasn't really working. And you'd have to kind of guess how much to push it, or how much pressure to give it so that it didn't bind. So I contacted OPT, which is where I bought my mount from, and they said that they didn't have any in stock. This was at the beginning of last week, and since then they do have some in stock. But what I did was I went to Ioptron. I emailed their tech support and they were pretty quick to respond. Within about 4 hours, I got a response with a PDF on how to fix it. I went ahead and performed that procedure and it did work to a point. I'm able to now lock the gear in, except that my deck axis, I'm not sure you're going to see this on the camera, but you can probably see my telescope moving. It's got this here, and it's pretty bad, and no matter what I do, I can't get this to tighten up. And I believe it's because even after I performed the fix that they asked me to perform, I'm still unable to get my hex wrench into the top hole. There's two holes here, one on the side, one on the top, to be able to adjust the gears, or actually the spring tension that loads the gear in. And because I can't get the top wrench, or the wrench in that top hole, I believe that's why I can't really lock this down correctly. And also, I want to point out that when I've been testing with Pec and Meridian flips, I sometimes lock up the mount. It just freezes up. It won't do anything until I power it down and power it back up again. So that's pretty much unacceptable to me as well. So I am going to be asking OPT if I can return it for another mount. The funny thing is that I can still somewhat use the mount. I've been using it. I only used it at 3 nights this week because of the clouds and the snow. So I really haven't had a chance to test this all that much since I bought it. But I was getting really good numbers on the excellent seeing night. I was actually in the high 0.2 to low 0.3 total RMS, and that's without recording a Pec curve because I'm unable to, because it freezes up the mount. I'm hoping that if I am to get a new one or get this one repaired, that I'll be able to then record a Pec curve and actually even have lower total RMS numbers. Now really all I want is anything under 0.5 total RMS. It works for me. My pixel scale at the worst when I'm using this in bin 1 mode is 0.33 arc seconds per pixel, which I almost never ever do. And when it's in bin 2 mode, it's 0.68. I want to say maybe it's 0.66. It's 0.68 pixels per arc second. So as long as I'm guiding below that, and my RA and my deck are very similar to one another, that I have no problem. And I really don't need it to get any better than that, and that's fine. At this long a focal length, I think that it's really good that it is where it's at. Now on a regular seeing night and even a bad seeing night, those are the 3 nights I had. I had a bad, a regular, and an excellent. And on the bad night, the numbers got up to 0.7 total RMS, and on the regular night they fluctuated between the high 0.3s and 0.5. It just, once in a while it would hit like 0.52, but the majority of the time it was in the 0.4s, which to me is completely acceptable. That's actually amazing. I love that. I love those numbers, and it's just, basically it just means that I know that my images are going to be as sharp as they possibly can be with the gear that I have, and it's not because limitation of the mount. And that's all I'm really looking for, that and the ability to hold a lot of weight in some breezy conditions. Around here we usually get anywhere between 10 to 20 miles an hour wind on a normal basis. And I've noticed that since using this mount this last week compared to the EQ6, that the wind really does not bother this at all. And this is kind of like a sail in the wind, even with the protection of the observatory. So I'm pretty happy about that. I also wanted to go over some of the cabling. This is not my final cable job. Unfortunately, the sun is coming in at this direction, so I had to kind of close the observatory a little bit. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see these, but I'll take some better images before publishing the video. But the cable management is kind of in disarray right now. But the main part is that I have no snags and I have nothing weighting down the back end, the camera side of the mount, which is fantastic. I also want to cover the amazing job of being able to balance this thing very precisely. There's no stiction whatsoever, and everything just is so fluid. I mean, I barely touched anything, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing, because it makes it very difficult to balance the mount. But at the same time, once you have it balanced, it is precise. You know it's precise, and you have no questions if you're balanced correctly or not. And I mean, this thing is just dead on. Both sides, RA and deck, plus the third axis, what they call the third axis, when you move this over and actually have it straight up and down, perpendicular to the ground. Everything is completely balanced. And so that's a really good feeling to get that. With the EQ6, I was having some stiction even after rebuilding it. There was just a little bit of stiction to it, and it wasn't just as smooth as I would have liked it to be. This is like a night and day difference as far as that goes. So I'm very pleased with that, and I'm very pleased with the tracking numbers and also the way that the operation of the mount. Unfortunately, of course, because of the deck issue, I do need to send this back, but I'm hoping that if I get another one, it's going to be just as nice as this one. It should be. I don't see why not. The other thing I wanted to mention too about this is the GPS satellite that comes with it. Or not satellite, but the GPS functionality that comes with this. I didn't really think I was going to use it because I'm permanently mounted. So I could see that not that this is really a portable mount or meant to be, but if you were going out into the field with it in a different dark site, every time you went out, or not the precise site, that the GPS would be wonderful, because it would just populate all the numbers for you. And that's what it's done for me here. And even though it's stationary, it's just I'm already spoiled instantly. I mean, I don't have to go in and populate the elevation or the longitude, latitude, anything. Even the time, it picks up the time and it syncs it up to my computer. So I was really impressed with that. The other thing I'm impressed with is the ease of polar aligning this. So with my EQ6, and I'm sure anyone who owns an EQ6 will know that the altitude adjustment knob in the back is awful. And I mean, I've lived with it for years now, and this is just completely different and very nice to use. It's a very pleasant to use this. Basically, you just loosen up these hex nuts, and you've got this nice big wheel here, and it's riding on like a huge worm gear, and you just run your fingers around, and it changes the elevation. It's super smooth like butter, and as well as the azimuth controls too. With the EQ6, they had very coarse threads, and you had to turn one and turn the other, and those knobs would start to dig into your hand. And this is completely different. It's very fine threaded. You could use your finger and just go around one and then tighten the other, back and forth, vice versa. And it literally took me less than 3 minutes to polar align my mount the first night that I had it with the Nina 3-point alignment plugin. It was super easy. So some of the things that I don't like about the mount, the main thing I think really is the Losmandy plate on the top. The screws that are on there, even though you can move them around on the plate where you need them to be, the actual bolts are what go into the dovetail from your telescope, and that's what locks the telescope into place. And I would much prefer the plate like the ADM plate that I had on the EQ6, where you tighten those up, and they were spring loaded, and they actually clamped the plate down, the whole plate down onto the dovetail bar instead of digging into it with these bolts. I don't think that it's really damaging the dovetail bar really by doing it this way. It just makes it hard because you can't open up the plate to fit the dovetail bar in like this and come back in and seat it in. So what you have to do, especially with this big thing, is you have to get it and slide it from the bottom all the way in, or the top, and that's kind of a pain. I don't plan on really, my plan is to make another pier and extend my observatory slightly so that I could put my EQ6 back up on another pier and then run 2 rigs at the same time. So the reason that I chose the CEM120 over some other mounts, the main reason is because of the climate where I live. It gets really hot in the summer and really cold in the winter. And with my EQ6R, I'm constantly adjusting the worm carriage so that it's bringing in the worm gear and reducing the backlash, especially on the deck axis. And it's gotten to be relatively easy. I mean, now it takes about 10 minutes, 15 minutes a night to do that when I decide that I want to actually adjust that. But the nice thing about the CEM120, it's got the spring-loaded gears, and I think that's what led me more to it than the EQ8R, because the EQ8R for the class of mount that it is, I did not like that it still had the stationary worm gears in it, and they weren't spring-loaded, and with the ability to just move a hex key to put some extra tension on that spring. The other big factor in my decision was to get, instead of like going with the CEM70 or something of that nature, or a CGX mount, was that I just wanted an observatory class mount to go inside the observatory. And because of that, I just didn't want to have to upgrade a mount again. I mean, now the mount's in here, and of course I have to send this one back. But when I get the new one, hopefully it all works, and then it'll just stay. It'll just be in place, and I don't ever have to worry about getting a scope that's too heavy or too big for it, because it's got 110-pound weight capacity to it. So that's really the driving factor on why the size of the mount. And then finally, what I did a lot of research, and I finally came down to either a CEM120 or an EQ8R Pro. Everything else was way north of my budget range, unfortunately. I would love to have a 10 micron or an astrophysics, even used. They were so much more expensive than this mount for an observatory class mount. These are actually probably the lowest that you can go for, but it's still a huge upgrade to anything that I've used before. And so the real kicker is that in December, I had actually had the EQ8R Pro in my shopping cart. I was getting ready to hit buy, and I wanted just to do a little bit more research. And then the holidays came, Christmas time, and I thought, well, I'll wait. And right after the new year, I'll go ahead and purchase this. And right after the new year, Celestron / Skywatcher, they're the same company in case you didn't know, they decided to raise all their prices in the US by about 25%. And so the EQ8R went from about $4,000 US to $5,300. And it's a $1,300 difference that I just could not swallow. And that was kind of like the nail in the coffin for the EQ8, and I decided to go with the CEM120. So I hate to say it, but actually the main driving factor, other than the spring-loaded worm gears for the CEM120, the main factor came down to cost. Finally, I wanted to go over some guiding numbers. I was getting some amazing guiding numbers. I ran some PemPro, and I ran a Pec Curve, and it came out exactly to -3.5, +3.5, just like the sheet of paper that I got when I bought this. So, testing that out made me feel a lot better. I just wish they would have tested the deck gear at the factory beforehand, but that's beside the point. But what I did notice, because of the deck axis, is that anytime I get up to zenith with the mount, it doesn't know which way to go because it's loose. So that's about it. I'll put some numbers up on the screen so that you can see just a couple graphs. I did take a lot of logs. I've been analyzing a lot of logs. I've got the graph of the PemPro graph where I used it to get a good Pec curve. Unfortunately, I can't write the Pec curve to this particular amount because it keeps freezing up every time I try and write that. I've got the latest firmware upgrades in here, and I don't know. Pretty sure it's the mount. I talked to Logan from Logan's Astrophotography. He's also got a CEM120. He has no movement in his deck axis, and he also has no problem getting into the commander and working in it. According to him, his mount's never frozen up like that. So I could imagine there's something wrong with the board or something in here. So hopefully I'll be getting it back soon and I can continue to do more videos on this. But in the meantime, if you like this video, if it was informative at all, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see the unboxing and the initial mounting of the mount on this pier, go ahead and check out this video right here.